My name is Mark Hofer, and I am delighted to be here with you today. I'm a professor in the School of Education, and for the last 2 years, I've had the great privilege of being the director for the Studio for Teaching and Learning Innovation. We're housed in the ground floor of Swem Library, just off the Botetourt Gallery, and around the corner from the Reader Media Center, for those of you familiar. We have just it's been an interesting experience teaching and learning amidst the pandemic, and we're here to share some stories with you today. As Mike mentioned, we have a wonderful set of panelists who I'll introduce here in just a moment, but we really appreciate you being here. We really appreciate you supporting William & Mary. So what we hope to cover in the session today is I'm going to give you a quick introduction to the Studio for Teaching and Learning Innovation, or as we call it in a shorthand, STLI. One of our colleagues, John Rio Frio, often calls us STLI Dan. Many of you will appreciate that reference. So I'll give you a quick introduction to STLI, ask you some questions using this Poll Everywhere tool that Mike introduced. I'll get a chance to hear from our panelists on a variety of questions, and then we'll have some time for you to ask questions of anyone on the panel or just the panel in general. Start with just a little bit about who we are, our team. So the studio was launched in 2019, in fall of 2019. So we're a relatively new unit on campus. Prior to the launch of STLI, there wasn't a university-wide coordinated effort to support teaching and learning. There were lots of individual departments, centers, and schools that offered different kinds of programming, but there wasn't really this sort of unified effort. So the studio was established as a way to bring some of those different groups together to create like one connecting hub for teaching and learning on campus, and then offering and elevating some of those different opportunities around campus as well. So our focus is around learning, discovery, and innovation. And our main goal really is to help to create transformative learning experiences for students. So we do this in a very deliberate way. Our ethos is around connecting and collaborating. Many other centers for teaching and learning around the country, or institutes for faculty excellence, or those kinds of things, the idea of a center or an institute has one connotation. A studio is something a little bit different, and we were very deliberate with the choice of that word to be part of our name, because a studio is a place where people come together to collaborate, to work on things together, to try out new things, to give each other feedback, and that's what we do in the studio. So we try to really work with students, faculty, other partners around campus, including IT and the libraries and the Reeves Center for International Studies and all different places to try to advance teaching and learning at William & Mary. We do it through consultations, events and programming, our student partner program, which you'll hear more about and get to meet two of our student partners, Abby and Sophie, today, as well as, again, as I mentioned, our collaborations with other university partners. So again, our purpose is really simple. If you are an instructor at any kind of appointment, whether you're a tenured faculty member or a grad student TAing a course, the studio is a place where you can come to get support, encouragement, ideas, innovative efforts, and hopefully build skills all along the way. So we focus on teaching excellence, as I mentioned, transformative learning, all in the idea to help both our faculty and students flourish through academic innovation. So I want to share two programs with you today, and you'll get to meet some of the folks from those programs. One is our Teaching Innovation Fellows. When I'm going to tell the story sort of how we navigated COVID here in just a few minutes, but when we knew that that things were going to be very different, especially beginning in fall 2020 when we had a little more time to plan, we wanted to identify some faculty from around the university and co-educators that had experience and support in either online learning, hybrid learning, which is a mix of online and face-to-face, experience with technology, but most importantly, that were willing to share their expertise, lead learning experiences for their colleagues, mentor colleagues, try new things, and especially learn in community. And Pablo has put the link to that webpage that describes the fellowship program in more detail, but you're going to get a chance to hear from Rasmussen, one of our inaugural STLI Teaching Innovation Fellows in just a few minutes. The second program we want to highlight today is our Student Partner Program. And this is one of our newest programs in STLI, and one of the things that we're most excited about. In this program, our undergraduate and graduate student partners are paired with faculty members to help them and support them and partner with them in a variety of ways. Could be anything from assisting them with remote and hybrid learning this year. So like, Pablo and Mike are sort of managing the chat and letting people in. It's really helpful for a faculty member to have what we affectionately call a Zoom buddy in their class to help facilitate breakout rooms and so forth. In other cases, it might be to create educational media for a course they're working on. It might be structured classroom observations at the faculty member's direction. So our partners work with us in collaboration in a variety of ways. We're very excited about this program, and you'll get a chance to hear from Abby and Sophie today, who have been, again, part of our inaugural student partners in our program. So, and we're highlighting these two programs because that they've been so instrumental over the last year, these people working with us. And also they both are possible through private support. So we want to highlight them and sort of make the case for why they're such a valuable part of our team. So Mike.
All right, so here's our second poll of the day. Again, if you want to respond, you can respond at pollev.com/STLI. If you don't want to respond, you can just hang out. And the reason that we're asking these questions is both to give you a little bit of an idea of the kinds of student engagement that we help faculty members with. This tool is called Poll Everywhere. And the idea here is, since you know a little bit about us, we want to know a little bit about you. So, it often helps for a faculty member to know about their students when they want to target the message that they're giving. And so the same thing with us, we want to kind of find out a little bit about our audience so that we can know you better, so that we can provide the information, because we've got lots of information to share. And this way we can talk to things that might specifically be interesting to you. And we can see we've got people are alums, people are students, no William & Mary parents yet. We've got some friends of William & Mary, and we've got 29% have multiple affiliations so far. And that's my situation, as a matter of fact. I'm an alum. I'm a parent of an alum. I am a staff member. So yeah, I have 3 affiliations. I'm no longer a student, but maybe we're all students all the time that's the great thing about William & Mary. I'm always learning from my colleagues and the other students. And all right, so what do you think, Mark? Is that enough?
Yeah, that's great. One of the things I'm always interested and intrigued about this community is when you graduate from William & Mary, sometimes you don't stray too far. And that's why I think we see some of those multiple affiliations. So that's always exciting. It's a great community to be a part of. So as Mike said, now that we know a little bit about you, I want to take a few minutes to introduce our panel. We're really fortunate, and it says a lot about these folks and the William & Mary community in general. It's been a long year, as you can imagine, and the semester is slowly sort of reaching that crescendo of the end of the semester. And every person that we asked, our first choice for participating in the panel, eagerly agreed. So I'm very grateful to them. So I'll start with Mike Blum, who you've met here. Mike has been helping William & Mary navigate the intersection of technology and academics since 2001. He consulting with instructors, teaching students, managing large and small projects, and developing a myriad of online resources. And I should underline that phrase. Mike is our most prolific video tutorial creator extraordinaire. His current projects include helping instructors and students tell effective stories. He's a sought after guest lecturer in that regard, building and nurturing communities across campus, and managing STLI's faculty consultation program. So thanks, Mike, for being here. Randy Coleman is perhaps the best example of how many of our faculty continuously work on perfecting their teaching throughout their careers. Randy has been at William & Mary for 50 years and continues to be a leading teaching innovator on campus. His biochemistry course, this is my favorite part, was one of the first 2 fully online courses taught at William & Mary in 2014. And it continues to be one of the most popular with students. An award-winning teacher, he continues to be a significant and direct influence on teaching at William & Mary, and it always is eager to support his colleagues. So say hello, Randy.
Hello, everyone. Looking forward to making whatever contribution I can to today's program. Thank you.
Thanks, Randy. Abigail Gutleben is a sophomore psychology and anthropology double major. She began working with STLI this fall as a student partner. She worked closely with 2 professors to help them set up and manage Zoom sessions and administer exams via Blackboard. Abby has worked with STLI also as a communications assistant, where she helps to create and moderate posts about teaching and learning on our STLI social media channels. Say hello, Abby.
Hi, everybody. I'm so honored to be asked to be a part of this talk, especially with this pilot student partner program. So thank you for having me today.
Thank you so much, Abby. In the student partner theme, I'm going to introduce Sophie Hamilton. She is a senior majoring in film and media studies and minoring in history. Sophie has worked at both the Reader Media Center in Swim Library and STLI. In STLI, she's an educational media production assistant, and she has helped to develop and produce a student podcast called These Unprecedented Times about learning and the student experience in the age of COVID. We'll have to put the link to that in the chat here at some point. And additionally, she is producing and directing a film on our student partner program. She's assisted faculty by creating educational content, including video interviews with instructors and staff. Say hello, Sophie. Oh, Sophie.
Oh, I think Sophie's audio is.
Yeah, Sophie, maybe see what you can do about it. Ironically, that our media guru has the technical issues. That's usually the way it works.
You know, that happens to me all the time.
Yeah. We'll come back to you.
Me?
Yeah, there we go. We got you.
All right, fantastic. Sorry, I got too ambitious with the headphones. I just wanted to say thank you guys so much for having me today. I'm really excited to be on this team and to speak about it with all of you right now.
Thank you, Sophie. And last, but certainly not least, a professor of both music and Middle Eastern studies, Anne Rasmussen has been with William & Mary since 1993. Anne is a great example of so many William & Mary faculty publishing prolifically in her field and making that research come alive in the classroom. Professor Rasmussen has partnered with STLI since its inception in a variety of ways. She's called on us to help her incorporate innovative assignments into her courses, and we've in turn called on her to participate as a Teaching Innovation Fellow, and she's made great contributions there. Always eager to learn and always willing to share her knowledge, and represents the very best of William & Mary faculty. Say good morning, Anne. And Anne is joining us from 2 hours in the past, I guess. So it's early for her today. Thank you for being here, Anne.
I am. Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Mark. Yes, I have a research leave this semester, so I'm actually zooming into my life from the Rocky Mountains in Colorado. And thank you for having me. I've had a fantastic experience as a STLI fellow, and I wanted to just give a shout out to Sophie Hamilton, who made a fantastic film about the ways we've been adapting to COVID in one of the classes that I teach. And may I put that link in the chat, Mark? Would that be okay?
Please do.
I've got it ready to go. Thanks.
Thank you, Anne. Wonderful. And that's just indicative of Anne's contribution. She's always ready to jump in and offer ideas and support. So thank you again to all our panelists, and we'll get a chance to interact with them in just a few minutes. Before we jump into the panel discussion, I do want to sort of set the stage, though, and tell you just a little bit. I'm sure many of you are familiar with this, but I thought I'd just sort of hit some of the, I don't know if high points is the right way to frame it, but our journey since just about a year ago. March 13th is a day that we'll all remember. Ironically, one of our team members started the day before the campus was closed due to COVID. So he had a very unusual onboarding experience. But on that 13th, we closed the campus with the plan for resuming classes remotely on March 23rd. So that was a significant detour for us. So imagine from the student or faculty perspective, in a 10-day period, we shifted from the hallmark of the William & Mary experience is that close communication and connection between faculty and students and very interactive experiences. All of a sudden, within 10 days, we had to figure out how can we replicate some of that experience to finish out the semester in a completely remote context. So that meant more than 1,000 courses were forced to completely change modalities in that time period. We worked with colleagues from across the university, most closely with IT and the libraries, to develop a key teaching resource site to help faculty quickly get up to speed with some of the critical technology skills that they were going to need, as well as some techniques and instructional practices to shift to that remote context. We augmented that with a variety of series of live webinars and small group meetings on Zoom to problem solve and support one another. Again, going back to that idea of STLI as a studio, as a community, it really was a whole community effort to try to figure this out. When we looked ahead to the fall and spring semester, thanks to the amazing planning of the code response team and the commitment, just the amazing commitment on the part of students and faculty and staff to be healthy together, we had more modality possibilities available to us for the fall and spring semesters. Courses could continue to be offered totally remotely. And for some large classes, that was really the only option just because of density in the classroom space. Others opted for a fully face-to-face experience. We're calling Togetherland on here. And many others, it was a mix. It was a blend of both the online and face-to-face elements. So in order to prepare for that fall semester and then again for the spring, we really put an emphasis, both the faculty and students in surveys from the spring of 2020 mentioned the importance of connection and the importance of engagement. So we worked with faculty, we created, again, a whole series of webinars and resources, lots and lots of consultations that Mike will talk a little bit more about later, to try to help faculty make the most of whatever modality that they were choosing, and then trying to support them along the way. So together with the help of the panelists, we're going to share some stories about what this year has been like for us and how we've survived, but in some ways even thrived during this challenging year. And I think what's most exciting as we see light at the end of the tunnel, we start to realize all the capacity that we've built and all the new ideas and skills that we've developed together. So we're actually very excited and enthusiastic, I think, about going forward. So we're gonna hear from the panelists today about that. So and we're gonna do one more poll question here. The rapid shift to remote was really not the same, for different faculty members based on their typical teaching style, the kind of course they were teaching, and the experience they brought with them with teaching with technology, and especially with hybrid or online formats. So with the poll on your screen, pollev.com/STLI, what would you guess the percentage of faculty who had taught remotely or online prior to the pandemic? I'll give you one clue. If you remember my introduction of Randy, we mentioned that his was one of the first 2 courses offered online at William & Mary in 2014. So yeah, so we're seeing the answers kind of congregate there towards the under 5 and 5 to 25%. The actual number was approximately, based on our survey from the spring of 2020, was approximately 17%. Now, of that 17%, many of them had taught more in a blended, so a combination of face-to-face and online. A much smaller percentage had taught fully online. So you can imagine it was a challenge in the sense that this was a new experience for a lot of faculty. But add to that the commitment on the part of William & Mary faculty to create an engaging experience with meaningful connections with their students, and that amplifies the challenge. It amplifies the pressure in some ways. So that's kind of what we were up against. And so we're going to do another poll here. If you were teaching during the pandemic, what do you think might have been your biggest challenge as an instructor? So the lack of experience teaching remotely, keeping students engaged when they aren't physically in the classroom. One thing we learned right out of the gate was how much we relied on those informal cues to seeing if students were understanding, if they were engaged, if they were with us. It's easier for them to kind of tentatively raise that hand in the classroom than they might in a Zoom meeting. So we definitely saw that was an issue. And just redesigning your course, in some cases, really having to really reimagine, and Anne will be able to share some stories with that for sure. And even just maintaining a positive attitude, it's been a real challenge. So I think all of these answers were certainly present among faculty, to varying degrees. But we'd love to hear from the panelists. Randy, can we start with you? What were some of the most significant challenges you and your colleagues faced in the spring or fall, and how did you work through them?
Okay. Yeah, there were lots of challenges. I was in the middle of teaching my neurochemistry class to 60 some graduating seniors, and we were just ready to move into the portion of that class where student groups would present a particular topic to the class. So I had to very quickly think about how I could organize all of that in a remote environment. And it took me a little bit of time to think through how I wanted to do that. Finally decided that we were going to use Zoom to get together 3 students at a time to do a recording of the presentation, and then I would put the recording out on Blackboard for the rest of the class to review. One of the things that struck me about that process was, yeah, I'm a real student-oriented faculty member. First of all, I love to engage with students all the time. I come to class early. I teach at 8 o'clock in the morning. Students come drifting in. I'm talking with them. I walk with them back to the Integrated Science Center. So I'm always doing that. And suddenly I lost that capability in a remote environment. So I started picking up on the idea of these groups of 3 students at a time working with me through Zoom. It was a nice opportunity for us to get together just in that small group. And I spent a fair amount of time just talking about life with them and how they were getting along. The most recent poll you guys took, I was one of the people that clicked on maintaining a positive attitude, because I think if we have a positive attitude, everything else falls into place. Your engagement in the class and so on. So I managed to pull off the remainder of the semester with these groups getting together, recording their presentations, and then putting those out on Blackboard. The other group that I enjoyed working with were my chemistry colleagues, because many of them were teaching large classes. They had to do it remotely completely. They didn't have a clue what to do at that point. So I fell back on my, I hesitate to call it expertise, but I had been doing online biochemistry, as you mentioned, Mark, since 2014. So I had this nicely structured biochemistry course, which I teach asynchronously in the summer. And I opened that course to all of my chemistry colleagues to look at what I was doing. I went around individually to help them do what they felt they needed to do in their classes. And I think along with the studio folks and Mike Blum and others, all those tutorials you guys put together in a week practically just amazed me. And if it weren't for the help of the studio and folks like me scattered around campus to put colleagues at ease that, it was going to work out, I think that was the biggest thing. One final quick comment. I don't want to take a lot of time here, but I also initiated in that neurochemistry class, I initiated something called Atrium Chats because I'm in the Integrated Science Center. The atrium area is where there's a Starbucks outlet, lots of tables, and students like to gather together there. And every time I walk through there, I invariably find a few students that I'd like to sit down and chat with for a little bit. And I kind of invite myself to their table and just start talking with them. So I set up a series of Atrium Chats that spring where students in my class could get together with me through Zoom. I told them to bring a beverage of their choice with them, and we would just talk about life for a while. And I found that that really worked very, very nicely. Just kind of made the class a little more personable when we had this remote screen that we were dealing with all the time. Those couple of stories there, I think will set the stage for what we did. But all of the technology that I've used at William & Mary, and that goes way back to 2004 when I started recording courses. If it weren't for IT back then, and now the studio now being present as a support structure for faculty, we could not have pulled this off. We would have failed miserably. So I think the success the university has had with what we have done really comes back to the commitment that the studio has made and the IT folks have made to make sure that the technology can work as best as it possibly can. So I'd just like to give a shout out and thanks to the studio and to IT in general for what they were able to do. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Randy. And I think that really gets to the core of, the atrium chats. That's what we all struggled with, I think, in one way or another, trying to maintain those connections, and those creative ways are, it approximates what we can do in person, but it certainly still helps to keep that connection alive. So thanks, Randy. Appreciate that. And could you share a little bit about your experience? I know you had an interesting road, and we're very creative along the way.
Thank you. I couldn't agree with Randy more. When the call came out to apply to be a STLI fellow, I thought, well, I'd rather, be on the wagon than a casualty by the side of the road. I've had such a positive experience with IT all along the way that just, continuing to add to my toolkit was a strategy that I knew was going to help me. I think in the last question, I would have chose all 4 answers. I think you should have had another button to push that said all of the above. I'm going to talk a little bit about redesigning my courses and for online instruction, but I'd like to also say that everything that I've learned in STLI has helped me to live my whole life remotely. And right after this meeting, I have a meeting with colleagues in Indonesia. I mentioned I'm on research leave. I should be in country, and I have embarked on some virtual ethnography with colleagues, bringing people together, from all over Indonesia in a series of focused group discussions. And I never would have thought of doing this a year ago, never. For me, research meant getting on a plane and going somewhere. During the summer, Mark and I met with a number of arts colleagues, right? So I teach academic courses, but I'm also a musician. I direct an ensemble, and we met with people in theater, in art and art history. How do you change these modalities that you're used to? For example, you grab an instrument on the way into class and you show it and you hand it around and you play it, or you have people do, clapping exercise to understand polyrhythms in Africa, right? How do you do that on Zoom? And with our other colleagues, how do you teach pottery on Zoom, right? How do you have students doing skits and so forth? So over the summer, we met with our arts faculty and just brainstormed. In terms of my academic courses, when we all went into shutdown, yeah, you can share the slides. Thanks, Mike. I felt my academic courses were even more exquisitely prepared. And, if you're kind of a nerd about preparing for classes, and of course, music classes are incredibly interactive. We use sound clips, we use video, I sing, I go to the piano, I play something. So moving all that online was a real challenge, but it was also, really great for the students. So in the top slide, you see Natalie Rowland in the middle doing her final presentation in a final symposium that we had. So I also shared my challenges with technology with my students. They had to figure out, how to share their screen and how to, not only how to just prepare a little PowerPoint presentation, but also how to engage with people through this screen in real time. I did, it was worrisome, for example, when students didn't show up. You know, when you're in the department and you're used to seeing people, you know, maybe you'll bump into somebody that didn't show up to your class and you can say, hey, how you doing? What's going on? That's not possible in Zoom when all you have are those two, you know, those 2 class sessions or 3 class sessions a week. And there were some students who fell off the cart and I couldn't catch them. And I really learned how this shutdown and quarantine affected my students. Some of them had really challenging travel situations. You know, one went back to China, one had to, another international student had to fly to Florida to be with an uncle or a brother or something there. There were students who were at home all of a sudden with 4 or 5 siblings also, you know, fighting for bandwidth. But I do feel for the most part that my students and I really celebrated our success. And we, you know, we had this, we're going to do this, we're going to get through this attitude. Another thing that I did was in the bottom slide, and anyway, I think you can see Natalie's energy on this slide. In the bottom slide is a presentation by our colleague Andrea Wright from Anthropology and Middle Eastern Studies. And I was the chair of the program director for Asian and Middle Eastern Studies. And we are used to a very robust season of programming events. Many of our colleagues in 36 different disciplines and departments invite incredible scholars, artists to campus to interact with our classes, to present, to rehearse, to do lectures and so forth. But since we couldn't get access to any of our funding this year, we created a homegrown grassroots lecture series featuring our own all-star faculty. And these events were terrific. We had wonderful attendance. I think last fall I did 5 events of our faculty. Students showed up, faculty showed up, alumni showed up. People's colleagues from all over the world showed up to these talks, and they were free. You didn't have to go to the airport. You didn't have to get people to sign up to go to dinner afterwards. You know, in some ways, it was liberating to just be able to say, hey, Friday afternoon, I'm going to turn on this talk for, you know, for 90 minutes and visit with my colleagues. And that is the extent of the effort. So that's Andrea Wright with her presentation. Mike, you want to hit the next slide, please? Now, I also direct the Middle Eastern Music Ensemble. And the logistics of transferring that classroom culture to Zoom took on a whole new flavor. We went into shutdown in March of 2020, and we had several concerts with guest artists planned. When we dove into quarantine, keep in mind that many of our students didn't even, I mean, they went home for spring break and then they stayed at home. So they didn't bring their instruments with them. Believe it or not, some of them didn't bring their laptops home with them. And so when we regathered, particularly for that ensemble, I realized, okay, we can have these weird rehearsals on Zoom, but some people don't even have instruments. So I actually sent them out. And like many ensembles, we did one of these virtual ensemble pieces. Just play a few seconds of that slide on the right, if you would, please. Good. Excellent. Yeah. So go back to the regular slide. So that was spring, at the end of spring. And we had our video professionally produced by a company that was started by a William and Mary alum. We learned all kinds of new skills about recording yourself at home, camera placement, lighting, how many hundreds of times, maybe not hundreds, but how many times you have to record yourself until you get a recording that you like, how to lay down a guide track that musicians are listening to in their earphones while they're playing along. Well, when we came back in the fall, we had hybrid rehearsals. And we also did one of these productions, but it was a student in the Department of Music at William and Mary who produced our videos for her senior project. So she was honing her skills while we were, continuing to make music. And you can see what she did, which I think is brilliant. And this is just a picture, we're not going to play the video, but she put our guide track, which was myself right behind the arrow there, and 5 musicians on the concert stage of Ewell Recital Hall. That was our guide track. That's what people listen to in their earphones. And so you've got us masked on stage as part of the video, and then all of the individual videos that students recorded at home. That's been just a terrific learning experience. And also it's a wonderful thing to put out on social media for publicity purposes, for recruiting. And people all over the world have seen our ensemble now perform, which is totally great. Everything I've done with STLI colleagues and fellows has put new tools in my box and given me confidence and enthusiasm, for teaching this dog new tricks. And I'm going to take those tools into my next meeting with colleagues in Indonesia as soon as we're finished with this. So thanks so much for joining us, and go Tribe.
And thank you so much. And the story that the student creating that video for the ensemble is such a great segue into our next section. Mike, could you start the next poll? I think we have 2 more polls here, and we're kind of winding down here a little bit, and we're getting ready for the place where you can ask your questions as well. So one of the things that we've alluded to is that we provided a lot of different kinds of support for faculty along the way. One-on-one consultations with a teaching consultant. Randy mentioned all of the web-based tutorials that Mike played a large part in creating, although others contributed as well. Hands-on learning lab or workshops where people learning together, and conversations with fellow instructors, like Randy mentioned, in working with his colleagues in chemistry. So a lot of different kinds of support. But one thing that we don't have on here that we were really excited to offer again for the first time this year is the student partners. That the students bring such a great perspective, creativity, and ideas that help us to think differently about how we're approaching challenges and opportunities in the classroom. So Abby, could we pitch it over to you to share some of the things that you were able to assist some of the faculty that you worked with in the fall or the spring this year?
Yeah, absolutely. So I worked with one faculty partner pretty consistently beginning in the fall. And aside from just different kind of nitty-gritty things like Google Suite applications and Blackboard, a lot of Zoom stuff, I really enjoyed offering my perspective as a student on the assignments that she was giving to her students. She taught a geology class for upper class students last semester, and then right now she's teaching a Call 150 class. And I really enjoy that class, especially because I'm just a sophomore and that I could have been in that seat like last year. So I offer my student perspective, and I think she really values it because it's not often that she can get someone's like honest feedback. If she were to ask her students, she might be a little frightened of giving honest feedback, but I really enjoy kind of brainstorming with her to come up with assignments or to modify assignments that she's had in the past to make them more engaging and interesting for students.
That's awesome, Abby. Thank you. And I do think you're right. We always, and oftentimes we try to partner students, even maybe from a different department, so they really can provide that perspective of a student that isn't necessarily steeped in the discipline quite yet, and they can offer that perspective. So, and I know I've heard many times from your faculty partner how valuable your feedback has been. So thank you, Abby, for your wonderful contributions. And I think that also connects with, I think, one of our most powerful kinds of support we offer, whether it's through the fellows or through our STLI team members, is one-on-one consultations. Everybody's challenges are different. Everybody has their own unique opportunities and struggles. So Mike, I wonder, as one of our most active teaching consultants, can you share a little bit about the importance of consultations and how you support faculty?
Absolutely. Thanks, Mark. Yeah, consultations are really important for us at STLI because they're at the center of developing the trust and the relationships we need to have a strong academic community. Generally speaking, there are two different tracks our consultations fit into, and I like to call these tracks the anxiety track and the curiosity track. So the anxiety track is all about the fact that instructors need to do something essential to the running of their course. I need to post my syllabus online, or I need to learn how to share my PowerPoint in Zoom, stuff like that. Our consultations with instructors who need answers provide them with the solutions to keep the class running smoothly. They may need to add some component to their class or fix something that's broken. So here you can see we've added a train car. It might be that syllabus that's now posted for the students, or it might be that PowerPoint they learned to share through Zoom. It's not a major alteration, but it's important to the course. And not being able to do these things on their own tends to stress instructors out. But these interactions, helping instructors solve these smaller problems, ultimately creates trust between the instructor and STLI. They might have been able to get their answers by researching our video tutorials or attending one of our workshops, but often a short conversation can result in a better solution than they might have found from one of our other resources. And it also lets them know we're here to provide a safety net if things don't go as planned. The curiosity track, on the other hand, starts when the instructor wants to explore different ways of doing things. So I want to develop a podcast assignment for my students, or I want to involve students in research opportunities. Let me just say that these types of conversations only happen when the instructor already trusts us. Maybe they had a problem we helped them solve, or maybe they came to one of our learning labs or community conversations, or maybe they saw a great tip we provided in our weekly emails. However they found us, our consultations on the curiosity track are more about thinking outside the box and seeing what opportunities lie beyond the track. And it's these conversations on the curiosity track that lead to innovation. These fundamental changes are often done before the semester gets started, but we've been known to help instructors make modifications to the plane while it's flying. It's challenging, but it's a lot of fun. And it's these types of consultations that ultimately result in partnerships between the instructor and STLI. These partnerships involve things like working together to design assignments, revising syllabi, and creating more interactive course websites. But my favorite of all is when we're invited into the classroom to teach students how to tell better stories. And here I am in a recent class visit teaching students in a Call 100 course about podcasting and the power of storytelling. The anxiety track and the curiosity track are both important. The anxiety track develops trust, and the curiosity track develops partnership. And both trust and partnership are essential to yet another STLI goal, and that's developing and fostering academic community across William & Mary. Anyway, that's my short spiel on the importance of consultations. Thanks, Mark. I'll pass it back to you.
That's awesome, Mike. It really is a big part of the heart of what we do and how we connect. So, and what's the number? It's over 500 consultations easily, right?
Well, this semester, since the beginning, we've had over 275 consultations. Last year, during the pandemic, we had over 550, almost 600 consultations. So, yeah.
Wow. So you're talking about close to pushing 800 consultations in a year for a team of 4 consultants. That's pretty remarkable. That's great. And I do want to say this. I don't want to spend a lot of time because we're a little bit behind time, and I want you to hear from the students, and I want you to hear get a chance to ask your own questions. But and I guess I'll take this opportunity to invite you to add any questions you have to the chat so that we can kind of be looking at those as we're preparing for the open part of this. Definitely invite you to do that into the chat as things occur to you. But I wanted to highlight the importance. You know, we're telling our story and sort of what we've done this year and what we've tried to offer. But it's so important to acknowledge all of our partners across the university that we work so closely with. Again, across the top, just to highlight the university libraries, tremendous partners. All the schools, departments, and programs, the academic leadership, chairs and program directors giving us feedback and insight. connecting us with faculty that might need support. And IT, as several folks have mentioned, has been really, really critical to making this happen. But really, all of the folks on this grid have been really instrumental to all the work we've been able to do. If we could advance, Pablo. We have one last poll question, and this is going to lead us into hearing from our student partners. So, they provide support for faculty on teaching and learning, but they're also, struggling through the pandemic as a student as they go. So if you were learning in this context, what would have been your biggest challenge, do you think? And again, these are things that we heard from students in the student survey all along. Sophie, could I pitch it to you and ask you, what were some of the challenges you experienced? You're a senior, you're finishing up. This is your last year at William & Mary, so your context may be a little bit different. But what did you experience in your classes, challenges, and how did professors work to support you and help you to navigate those?
Yeah, totally. So it's definitely been a tough year. Online universities have existed forever, and there's very much a reason that I and many of my peers elected to come here instead of attending a online university. Oh, hello. Oh no, sorry, hang on.
That's part of the charm of Zoom.
My bad. But yes, so I'm in North Carolina right now at an Airbnb, so it seems that they have jogs. But we all just met them for the first time. Exciting day. But yeah, so it's been really interesting just kind of adjusting to having to learn online after sort of expecting and hoping to be learning in a in-person context. I think that some of the biggest challenges that I faced was just kind of maintaining my passion for learning and excitement about topics as I was learning in a different environment that really required me to kind of motivate myself. It took away a lot of the community aspect of learning, and that just became a readjustment, I think. I found that the classes where I was most able to take advantage of the new kind of learning landscape were classes in which professors were really attentive to the way that students were struggling just by having to readjust the way that they're learning. So it could be very stressful just being able to motivate yourself to learn in a way that you weren't expecting to. And the classes that became the most enjoyable for me were ones where professors honored that and acknowledged that students were having to learn in a way that wasn't necessarily familiar to them or the most productive way for them to be learning personally. And I found that professors who further took advantage of the new opportunities that a tech-based space would provide also created a really exciting and invigorating learning environment despite the circumstances. But through all of that, we were kind of working in a just in a new space, so it could just be tough. But I think that we've professors who were attentive to students' needs made it a lot easier.
Great, thank you, Sophie. And that's something that we keep hearing from professors, that this has highlighted that importance of connection and engagement for them, and they're actively thinking about ways that they can bring that back to the face-to-face classroom in the next year. So I think that's top of mind for everyone. Abby, what would you add from your experience this year?
Yeah, so my challenges have definitely evolved, starting from spring of last year because I was a freshman then, and of course, we weren't fully remote, so I was working from home, and I had to deal with just having to basically babysit a younger cousin full time because he was home for school. But when we came on campus, a lot of the challenges I found didn't have to do with home life per se, but definitely being in an online format. And Sophie touched on this a lot, but staying motivated and maintaining a positive attitude despite, the circumstances just of the world and of learning, and having aspects of your college experience taken away from you. And it was just really stressful having to try to stay motivated about what you're learning when you have all these things in the back of your head and that, things could have been different. So yeah, people talk about Zoom fatigue a lot, and I think that's putting it lightly for a lot of students, especially for people who are neurodiverse or, struggling with things going on at home, family members who are facing health challenges, and just the anxieties that are associated with that. But, I think we're kind of getting the hang of it, luckily, as the year is finally winding down. But, I'm very excited for, a normal school year next year, especially since organizations like STLI have been so instrumental in kind of smoothing this process along. So
That's awesome. Thank you, Abby. It's definitely been a struggle and a challenge, but I think we are, we're seeing some bright spots, I guess. We don't have a lot of time left, but we'd love to answer any questions you have. I've seen a couple of questions pop up in the chat from Brooke. If some professors are not using STLI, what are the reasons for this, and what's happening to encourage them to partake? Word of mouth and success stories as trust and new partnerships develop. Yeah, it's a great question. I'd love to hear from either Anne or Randy. If you think why might folks not be seeking out STLI, and Mike can maybe talk a little bit about how we try to get the word out.
Could I jump on that, Mark?
Please.
It's a great question. I think, for some of us who've been teaching all of our lives, basically, I think there's this idea of, wait a minute, what, some ed person is going to tell me what to do based on some, quantifiable research. I know how to deal with students. I know how to teach. And I remember watching one of Mike's tutorials about putting your material, your syllabus on Blackboard. And he said, you have to create modules, right? And then, you have module 1, and in module 1, you have the reading and the assignments and so forth. And I was thinking about my syllabi and saying okay, well, I used to call them units, right? For this 2 weeks, we're going to concentrate on this. We're going to do these videos. We're going to read these articles, we're going to have this guest. And so, in some ways it's sort of pouring old wine into new bottles, but doing it intentionally, so that you're really, capitalizing on all the things you do well, but also adding a few new ways of presenting and communicating. And, have just done it time and time again. I could give many examples over the years where STLI, or before that, just, people like Mike or Mark or Pablo have really just helped me do what I do well, even better. But I think there is a reluctance among some faculty to say, I know how to do this. I don't need handlers to help me teach my classes. And that might be the reluctance. But I think most William and Mary faculty have really tried to pivot, intentionally and with all of the tools that have been made available to us by being, part of this wonderful university.
I'd like to thank Anne because she really hit the nail on the head. My colleagues in chemistry think they're the experts for chemistry. And, as Anne said, why do I need to turn to STLI to get some additional advice on how to teach this chemistry class? I mean, that goes back to when I first did my online biochemistry. A team was put together to help me. First of all, I didn't think I needed a team, but a team was put together. And one of the members of that team was in the School of Education. And she pointed out to me that I don't want to record a 45-minute lecture like I might give in class. She said, that's not going to work. I said, well, they can always pause the lecture when they want to. She said, no, you need to break it up into chunks. So I started thinking of lecture chunks. And for my online biochemistry, I put together 10 to 15-minute lecture chunks that the students love. They can pause, they watch one and then go away. So I think the reputation of STLI is growing. And the disciples of STLI, like myself and Ann, are out there spreading the word, and it's only going to get better. And I feel so comfortable turning to Mike Blum in particular, to call him up on his cell phone and say, hey, I had a problem here, Mike, how to solve this. And 5 minutes later, he'll send me an email telling me to look at a tutorial that he just created, so I can deal with it. I mean, it's that kind of relationship that I've developed, and I'd like to see that happen among all of the faculty. We'd be a better university if faculty took advantage of STLI.
And if I can just add one other thing, it has a lot to do with people thinking that they're the experts, and they are the experts in what they teach in their field. The other thing that I think that maybe there's a reluctance is because it shows vulnerability, it shows weakness from the faculty perspective. It takes a lot of trust, and I was talking about trust in our consultations before. And so, because they're the expert in their field, they don't want to show that they're necessarily vulnerable. So that, I think it's both the expertise and the idea of vulnerability that makes some people reluctant.
That's great. Thanks, Mike. And I'm sorry, folks, that we're kind of running up against the time. I'm conscious of that. Please join me in thanking the panelists today. I think they were just amazing. I think you get a sense for how committed folks are at William & Mary to try to really make a difference for students. And thank you for being here today. As I mentioned at the outset, the Faculty Fellows and Student Partners Program literally would not be possible without private support. So please consider donating today to the STLI Fund. There's a link in the chat, or there will be if I don't see it yet. And please consider donating. Your gift literally will go directly to supporting the amazing students that you've seen here today, the Faculty Fellows, to help teaching and learning flourish at William & Mary. Really, really so grateful for you to be here today. And yeah, I can see the link here in the chat for the and on screen as well. So thank you so much. I hope you've enjoyed the panel today. Pablo also posted, we do have an event tomorrow that is open to hear a little bit more about, especially the student perspective over this semester. So invite you all to join us there if you'd like to go a little bit deeper. So thank you so much. And I'll be happy to stick around for a few minutes afterwards if folks have individual questions. But otherwise, thank you so much. Have a wonderful day, and go Tribe. One Tribe, one day.